Thank you for joining me on this brief introductory video to Google Classroom. This video is designed to work hand in hand with my face-to-face training so that you can get an idea of the basics of Google Classroom, as well as get some tips and tricks that I've found useful in using it as a teacher, so that you can come into our face-to-face sessions with a little bit of knowledge and a little bit of practice, if you haven't had any already, and then use some of the face-to-face time that we spend together asking questions and helping us brainstorm ideas. So it won't be long, but hopefully it'll be helpful. Let me introduce myself. My name's Daniel Bam. I am a Fort Worth ISD educational technology coach. I currently serve William James Middle School, Polytechnic High, Tarrant County South Early Collegiate, Young Men's Leadership Academy, as well as the Leadership Academy at Mitchell Boulevard. My background in education is in CTE and AVID, and before working in Fort Worth, I worked in Richardson ISD as well as Wiley. I also have a background working in information technology support, mainly focusing on streaming video and multimedia delivered over computer networks. And that kind of harkens back to my background in television and radio news production, where I spent a lot of time editing audio, editing video, and getting things ready for broadcast and sharing. Our learning objectives for our face-to-face session. I will spend a little bit of time talking about survival in a one-to-one environment, some tips and tricks that'll help you work with students who are bringing district-managed devices into your classroom to help things flow more smoothly. I'll also give you a chance to experience Google Classroom as a student. During the face-to-face session, you will enroll in a Google Classroom I've created so that you can see what students see when they're assigned materials, when they're given assignments that they have to complete and submit, so that you can both experience the teacher perspective as well as experience it from the student side. We'll go through some types of work that Google Classroom can facilitate, but I will reach out and ask for ideas. If you're doing something with Google Classroom that I don't mention or don't touch on, please bring it up, because there's a good chance if it's working well for you, it can work well for another teacher. I'll show you some of my favorite tricks, some little things that I've done that you're maybe already doing, but it's things that can really help you streamline your workflow compared to what you might have been doing before. And then a reminder that I'm here to support you on an ongoing basis as you start integrating these different platforms with your kids. A couple of things about one-to-one survival I want to go over real quick and have you keep this handy as reference. We did have some sign-in trouble on several of our campuses a little while back, and I wanted to remind you about, if you see this screen on a student device, there often is an option for that student to go ahead and sign in, because in a one-to-one environment, he or she is probably bringing the same Chromebook to class on a regular basis. So if the internet connection or the sign-in portal is acting a little bit strangely that day, you still have the option to sign in on your device as an existing user. I've used this option myself and find that it gives me offline access to things that I've been working on, and sometimes the connection reestablishes and things start working well again. I'd also like to touch on password reset. I have enough trouble remembering my password on a daily basis, and I probably enter it wrongly at least 4 or 5 times a day, and so we can only imagine what it's like for some of our students. A reminder that you, as a teacher, have access to passwordreset.fwisd.org, where you can reset student passwords to the district default that uses the first couple of letters of their first name, the first couple of letters of the last name, as well as their campus number. And from there, they can create a new password. Now, in regards to new passwords, one thing we've seen is that the old standard of 8 characters isn't always working, and we're encouraging students to go for 10 characters in their passwords. Staff, I believe, are already at the 10-character limit. Someday they may be pushed to 12. And what I often recommend in making a password is that you take something that is meaningful to you but doesn't really make sense to anybody else, and then change some of the characters to make it a little more random and a little more secure. For example, I refer to my children as the Bug and the Bubsy Man. So I can take those and combine them together, use an ampersand for and, use the number 8 instead of a capital B, use the @ symbol instead of an A, and use a $sign instead of an S. And even just minor changes like one number, one special character can make a password very difficult to break, and oftentimes folks won't even bother. They're going for the easy connections and the easy breaks, not even something remotely difficult. I'm going to ask you to enroll in my Google Classroom. This is an example of a class code that I use at William James Middle School, but it's a code that you display if you want students to enroll in yours. And from here, I'm going to transition out of my slide deck, and I'm going to go to the my.fwsd.org apps portal. And this is what I encourage students and staff to use to access not only Google Classroom, but resources like Focus, resources like Achieve 3000, district-specific resources are all housed here for easy access. The username is just your first name and last name if you're a staff member. If you're a student, it's just S and your ID number. There's no @ symbol and extension after that. The password is your usual Active Directory password. Hopefully I entered mine correctly for demonstration purposes. First time for everything. And from here, a lot of the applications that you're familiar with. I mentioned Achieve earlier. There's Edgenuity, Edugence, Eduphoria. Related to those, of course, the Fort Worth ISD curriculum is now housed here. Employee self-serve for pay information. And there's Google Classroom. I gave Google Classroom a click, and in just a moment, it's going to display every class in which I am either a teacher or a student. Off the bat, if you're trying to get students to join your Google class, you'll want to coach them to find the plus sign. They won't have the option to create a class since they're students, but they will have the option to join a class, and from there, that's where they would enter that unique code. One question I often get is, does the code change? And the answer is it does not, unless you make a copy or do something secondary in terms of that class. So once you create a class, such as first period reading or period 8, that code is something you can write on your board, it's something you can post, and it will not change. I'm going to drop into my master class for some demonstration purposes. And I often encourage teachers to put together a master class, and you'll see why here in just a minute. But it allows you to house materials and then copy them into other classes as you need them. And when you start a class, there's the code, which you can display on a projector if you need to for your students to join. The stream we'll talk about in just a minute because that's where everything is housed. But I want to spend some time in the Classwork tab. In Classwork, you'll see a stack of assignments and a stack of materials. You'll notice that I've got them sorted out by topics. Google Sites is a topic under which I have several materials and several assignments, some of which are posted, some of which are grayed out in draft mode. And as you scroll down, you'll see topics that don't yet have any assignments, but I went ahead and created them because I anticipate building things for them before too long. So I recommend creating topics as tabs in a binder, places that you can organize materials into, and the students will see the topics as well. So it's very helpful to point them toward a topic so they can more easily find an assignment. One trick, 3, 2, 1. We'll spend a lot of time in our face-to-face session going through the different types of materials you can generate in a Google class. The one thing I wanted to point you to, and we'll spend some time talking about it face-to-face as well, is the option to reuse a post. And when I talked about having a master class, the reason I build a master class is so that if I want to use something I've created in another class, I click Reuse Post, and from here, I have access to every class in which I am a teacher. And the materials run long and longer. Okay. 3, 2, 1. 3, 2, 1. We will spend a lot of time in our face-to-face session exploring the different types of materials that you can create in your Google Classroom. But what I want to do at a minimum is let you understand that The classwork tab is where you as the teacher will create the majority of your materials, and that you also have the option to reuse posts from other classes, which goes back to my workflow of having a master class in which all kinds of materials and assignments are housed. And from there, if you escape out to your other classes, you can go into another class, go to classwork, go to create, and you can reuse posts from other classes that you're teaching. And if I wanted to use this little assignment practicing how to embed a Google Calendar that exists in my master class, I would just click on it. I would create new copies of attachments, make sure it's selected, and reuse. That's one of the many tricks I'll show you. Of course, keep in touch if you have questions. I look forward to working with you face-to-face and working with you on an ongoing basis.